The idea is that it's all about incremental and iterative delivery, right? At the end of the day, right? So incremental delivery, and again, this is all depending upon the scale, right? So if we're talking at scale, we talk about incremental delivery differently. But if you think about it at a team level, incremental delivery is taking these big ideas that the product owner has and turning them into the stacked ranked backlog. So each thing in here could be thought of as an increment of the product. And then as I get in here and I start negotiating, right, I might start negotiating the depth of the solution that we're going to handle in this particular sprint. So we might take a user story, we might negotiate it into its simplest and possible instantiation. And then maybe we come back next sprint or the sprint after or whenever it gets to the top of the backlog and come and iterate on it more, right? So at the lowest level of interaction at the team level, incremental and iterative is really, kind of instantiated by, small and negotiable. We want to be able to do a couple things. We want to be able to write the software in such a way that when we run out of time and money, we can clip the remainder of the backlog and still have a valuable product, something that we can potentially ship, right? We want to keep it potentially shippable all the time, right? So that's why these things have to be independent, because if they were all coupled together, right, we might have to do the whole stack before we could release, and that would be against the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish. We want to be able to dynamically reprioritize. We want to be able to deliver with stable velocity. We want to have leading indicators of what done looks like, right? All those kinds of things. We want to be able to know the progress that we're making through the sprint, right? All those kinds of things. And so me, it's like, on the other side, we tend to, as leading Agile, one of our top business goals is predictability. Okay. And so the fundamental lowest level way that we get predictability is by knowing the size of the backlog and stabilizing velocity at the team level. Again, right, what we're hunting for, right, what we in Leading Agile and our clients are hunting for is predictability. Okay. And again, predictability comes from knowing the size of the backlog and knowing the velocity of the team, right? Because if we know the size of the backlog, we know the velocity of the team, we can start to anticipate how much of the user stories we're going to get through before we run out of time and money. Why? But at the end of the day, it's all about adaptability. It's all about incremental and iterative delivery. And this way of writing requirements and this way of thinking about the nature of the requirements as manifested user stories and accumulated into backlogs, it gives us the optionality that we need to be able to change direction, reduce scope, expand scope, extend time, reduce time, right? It gives us a lot more optionality than if we take these things as like a hard, like BRD kind of a thing where everything has to be done or nothing is valuable. So let's talk a little bit about what is a backlog. So a backlog is basically a list of instructions, requirements per se, although requirements is a loaded word in the Agile community. But we're going to unpack that here in a minute. But like, just think about it as the scenarios or use cases or use case scenarios that we're going to build. So there's things that have value to the customer. There are things that are able to be accepted by the product owner. There are things that actually increment and move the product along in a measurable, business-focused way. In my world, kind of a backlog is full of user stories. So let's talk about what a backlog is, right? So I guess the backlog is a stack ranked set of user stories, independent, negotiable, valuable, estimatable, small, and testable, right? So independent, I should be able to build one without building the next one and still have value. I should, maybe no dependencies, right? I should have the ability to prioritize them in different orders. I should have the ability to take certain things out, right? All that kind of stuff. So independent, negotiable. This isn't like a scope statement. It's a like again, that placeholder of our conversation. So what we're going to do is we're going to discuss what parts of the user story or how deep the user story goes, or maybe we'll break the user story in pieces, or maybe we'll take out some acceptance criteria, because the idea is it has to fit within the sprint. So everything about Agile is right, fixed time and cost, vary scope. So even at the user story level, we're always talking about negotiating what is the actual outcome that happens, right? So that it fits into the life of a sprint. Valuable, right? Has customer value. So estimatable, right? I think that's an interesting one, because it has to be well groomed enough to be known. The small general rule of thumb is you have to be able to do a handful of them within a sprint. They can't span sprints. You don't want to just have one of them in a sprint. So completions of user story is like kind of like a flow-based thing within the course of the sprint, right? So we want to see a steady burn down of user stories even within the sprint boundaries. An anti-pattern is delivering all of the stories at the end of the sprint, right? And then testable, right? We have to know what done looks like. You have the team that's responsible for delivering it, right? And then, the processes of Scrum basically say everybody kind of happens. It happens in sprint planning. The product owner brings the user stories to the team negotiates and estimates and figures out how many user stories they can pull in based upon their past velocity. So we start to think in terms of stable velocity, sustainable pace. We start to think in terms of yesterday's weather, right? Pulling all this stuff out from 15, 20 years ago. But all that happens in sprint planning. What you're doing is that the principle that you're looking for is that you have to have a well-groomed backlog. Right? The team requires well-groomed backlog. It is a non-negotiable input to a Scrum team. And most of the Scrum teams we go into do not have these. They do not have these backlogs written this way. So a big part of what we're doing is getting these authoritative backlogs. At the end of the day, every single team must have a backlog. It is a non-negotiable. So Teams Backlogs Working Test of Software is the non-negotiable base pattern within Leading Agile.